Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Meaning Conference. And just to make sure we're all in the same place, this is D5 on your program, Meaning Research. And we've got 4 speakers today. We've got a truly international group again. Brian Ostafin from the Netherlands, Adeeba from India, Lyndsay Kennedy from Liverpool, and Frank Martela from, I think this is Finland, isn't it? If I got it right? Okay, good. And so we'll give them all, to take around 10 to 15 minutes per speaker. So with that, I'm assuming we'll go in the program order, if that's okay with everyone. So Brian, you would then start us off.
Okay, so yeah, anyway, my name is Brian Ostafin from the Netherlands, but I am currently in Switzerland on vacation, but this is a really nice way to spend a vacation. It's been a great conference so far. So I am going to present some research on inductions, and I had some very important collaborators and research assistants that helped me along with this. I'll give a little nod to them. And I'm going to start off with presenting 2 different perspectives. One is this quote of Max Weber. Talks about a world that has become disenchanted through a number of processes, including, for example, the Protestant Reformation, the Enlightenment, scientific revolution, has objectified, made objects of nature, of other people, and of ourselves. And this is in contrast to perspectives that, say, were more common in the pre-empirical or pre-literate civilizations, and also in young people. So the Romantic poets, the Romantic movement, really appreciated and valued earlier cultures as well as childhood. So here's a nice poem by William Wordsworth. There's a time when meadow, grove, and stream, to the earth in every common sight, to me did seem apparelled in celestial light, the glory and freshness of a dream. It is not now, right? So then there's the enchanted world, but unfortunately, it is not now as it hath been of yore, both for the culture and for the adult within the culture compared to the child within the culture. Turn wherever so I may, by night or day, the things which I have seen, I now can see no more. So this idea, this experience of wonder is closely related to the experience of awe, and I'll use Keltner and Haidt's definition. My sense in this is my first time at the conference, strangely enough, because I have a great interest in meaning. But my sense is that the emotion of awe is something that's really quite central to a lot of what people think about and some of the work they do. So you may already be quite familiar with this, but I will just go over the definition again from Keltner and Haidt. Talk about awe as something that's elicited by something that has a great vastness to it, something much larger than the self. Right? And this can create a sense of disorientation that we are unable to comprehend, to like really engage with this experience because it is so vast, so much greater than our egocentric ways of understanding the world and ourselves. And so we become disoriented, and there's a need for accommodation, right? This Piagetian sense of becoming more than what we are, right? Not that you are fully accommodated, but that enough that you can at least make contact, meaningful contact with that elicitor. So previously in cultures, it used to be elicited by something along the lines of something divine, the supernatural. But Westerners, and particularly white Westerners, become less religious, and so Keltner and Haidt suggest that natural elicitors, such as great waterfalls or space, would be more likely to elicit the experience of awe. But something's important. I mean, it's not lost by no means, right? There's all these traditions, all these practices within different cultures for eliciting, in part at least, eliciting this experience. And so why might it be important? Why might it be useful? One is that it can create perhaps a perspective, again, from this egocentrism to self-transcendence, that can lead to different sorts of values as being important to one, from the extrinsic or having sorts of values, using Eric Fromm's terminology, to intrinsically motivated or being sorts of values, which should lead to more of a sense of meaning. This accommodative motive could elicit pattern search, which can also then facilitate the experience of meaning with the idea that it has to do with comprehension and coherence. And also an engagement with the word can become less conceptual, it's less abstracted. And again, because those abstractions, those concepts are broken down in the experience of awe. So your eyes might become more fresh, and so the world can become alive, like it was for the child in Wordsworth's poem. We also, again, may have less of a sense and reliance upon abstracted logic that relies upon individual things, and we may be more aligned to an intuitive mode of processing the world. Again, there could be less of a sense of a concern with ego, more self-transcendence, so less separation with others in the world, and a greater sense of just connection more broad. So all these things might lead to more meaning. So I'm going to present a few studies that examine that topic of inductions and meaning. And we had the hypotheses that induction would lead to a greater sense that life is meaningful and greater endorsement of being type values rather than having type values. So we had here is 267 participants, and there were 3 main conditions: a relaxation video for 5 minutes with relaxing music, a humorous video with some music and funny video. And then in this study, we actually wanted to validate an awe elicitor. So we showed 4 different films, including space or mountains and oceans and this sorts of things. But there was actually quite a lot of similarity in each of these films. So I just aggregated them into one condition for the analyses. For the validation element, we assessed awe. How much did the movie elicit awe? How much did it elicit a sense of vastness? How much did it elicit a sense, the need for accommodation? We also assessed emotion, the serenity, a sense of calmness, a sense of joy, and a sense of just general negative affect. And then for the meaning, we gave a 5-item measure, which is during the film, I felt there was meaning being alive. And then the being related sources of meaning, we had items such as the film made me think of, I should strive to do something for future generations, for generativity, should strive for inner peace and balance, for harmony. The film made me feel very close to nature, for unison with nature. Okay, so here are the results. I put in the upper right-hand corner, common interpretations of the effects for partial eta squared of small, medium, and large. And then what you'll see here is also I put double stars, asterisks, when the condition was significantly greater than both of the other conditions. So the awe films led to a greater sense of awe, a greater sense of vastness, and a greater need for accommodation. For the affect variables, the awe film led to more negative affect than the other 2 films. The humor film led to more joy than the other 2, and there's no difference on serenity. Now, the outcome variables was the meaning, the 5 items. So there was a difference between the groups, with the awe group indicating more of a sense of life as meaningful, a large effect size, greater motivation for generativity, harmony, and unison with nature. So in the second study, we expanded this to look to see whether or not awe induction would lead to other sort of meaning-related outcomes. And I will just, for the sake of time, move to this a little bit more quickly. So again, we had undergraduate participants, 105, and we had 3 conditions, this time equal, just using 1 awe film. The manipulation checks were similar to the previous study. And then for the meaning items, we had the same 5-item meaning measure. And then we had 2 measures we call like enchantment of the world. So we gave 4 items from Ralph Hood's mysticism questionnaire, such as during the film, I felt as though all things were alive, or as though all things seemed to be aware. And then a sense of connection with this world. And then we also gave a measure of perceiving pattern within randomness. This is something that's been used in other researchers. We gave nine paintings of Jackson Pollock, and we asked them 3 questions. The main important question was, to what extent do you see a pattern in this painting? And then we had fill out questions of how beautiful do you think this is, or how familiar are you with that painting? So here are the manipulation checks. You see that led to more awe, more sense of vastness, and more need for accommodation. Again, the humor led to more positive affect compared to the relaxation film, but not compared to the awe film. And the awe film led to more negative affect compared to both of the other 2 films. Now here are the main dependent variables, the meaning. So there was led to a greater sense that life is meaningful, a greater sense that the world is alive, that things have awareness, right? That's enchanted, and a greater sense of connection with that world. And for perceiving patterns within the pictures, we found that the induction did lead to a medium effect size difference between the relaxation and humor group and perceiving pattern within those abstract paintings. There was no difference between the groups on either beauty or familiarity with the pictures. We assessed mediation analyses to see whether or not the influence of the induction compared to both of the controls, now aggregated as one, on meaning, is that in part at least to the enchanted world. So we did a mediation analysis in which the world alive in connection to that world were simultaneously entered as mediators, and they both acted as mediators. The need for accommodation did not mediate the effective condition on perceiving picture patterns. And then just very briefly, third study expanded the study 2. We had a larger sample in a different mediator. So we had almost 200 participants compared to 100. And then everything was essentially the same except a different mediators, which we asked people about an intuitive processing mode. The video made me feel like I would listen to my heart, intuition, rather than my brain. Here's manipulation checks, same as always. It led to more awe and sense of vastness, a little bit difference on positive and negative affect. Now here are the outcome variables. On the left, you'll see that the film led to a greater sense of meaning in life and a greater sense of endorsing an intuitive information processing mode. Now, there was not a significant difference on perceiving patterns within the abstract pictures. It was in the expected direction, but it was not statistically significant. And we then conducted some mediation analyses, and the relation between the induction on a sense of life as being meaningful was in part explained by these individuals in the induction having more intuitive processing mode. We also did a mediation analysis with perceiving patterns. So there's no main effect of the induction on pattern perception, but there was an indirect effect to intuition. So the extent to which induction led to a greater sense of intuition processing, information processing, the more the person would likely to see pattern in those paintings. So in summary, the awe films reliably elicited awe-related emotional cognitive responses, a sense of awe and wonder, a sense of vastness, eco-transcendence. And despite eliciting negative affect, awe films increased meaning-related experience, such as a subjective feeling of meaning and a sense of a world as being enchanted, mixed evidence regarding perceptions of patterns and chaos, and an intuitive existential mode that partially explains the influence of awe on meaning and pattern perception. Okay, so that's what I had to say. I don't know if there's time yet for a minute or two of questions.
Yeah, we could have a minute or two. One of the questions from Jeff Schneider, would you please provide citations for these studies? I don't know if that's
in preparation. So I hope to get these in a couple of other studies written up this fall. That's my main goal for the fall.
Okay. Well, and you could, I'm not sure, Dr. Ostafin, what, if they can contact you if they think of something later.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and please just Brian.
Or Brian, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I'm an American. I live in Europe where it is very hierarchical, but I want to push back against that a little bit. So yeah, so I just took it off the screen. It's B, it's in Brian, D as in danger, but that's not my middle name. D as in Douglas. B, D, Ostafin, Ostafin, at rug.nl, University of Groningen. B.D. Ostafin at rug.nl. Yeah, I'm very happy to talk about anything having to do with or meaning. So
good. Well, thank you so much for your presentation, and we'll move on to Adeeba, I think.
Okay, thank you. Let me share my screen. Is it visible? Yeah.
Oh, there it is.
Okay. So I will be presenting a study that is part of my doctoral studies thesis. It's entitled Courage in the Face of Personal Risk, Meaning Making Among Disaster Rescue Volunteers. Yep. Yeah. So to give you some context, I will briefly take you through the events that unfolded in the state of Kerala in India in the monsoons of 2019 and 18. A series of floods submerged low-lying regions as well as areas in the vicinity of dams due to extreme rainfall and the unprecedented forceful release of waters from reservoirs. In August 2018 alone, more than 14 lakh people were displaced from their homes, and the economic loss was estimated over 40,000 crores in Indian rupees. This mega flood took over 480 lives. The climatic trend repeated the next year as well, and along with floods, massive landslides wiped out entire communities in a matter of seconds. The present paper is from a study conducted to explore the experiences and motivations of rescue as well as relief volunteers. And the data was analyzed with a specific focus on the objectives outlined for the present paper. Firstly, to understand the rescue workers' motivations to engage in operations despite the physical personal risks. Secondly, to understand their meaning making about their decision to respond and their actions in the field. And thirdly, to explore socio-cultural processes that influence their response. Some of the questions that I wanted answers to include what emotional, cognitive, and social processes influence the behavior of engaging in rescue operations that are of great physical risk? And how do the rescue volunteers make sense of their actions? The methodology, the ontological stance I adopt is that reality exists but is not completely apprehendable and is also subjective. And with regard to the epistemology, the position adopted is that knowledge is contextually located and transactionally created. Brown and Clark's approach of thematic analysis provides the larger guiding framework for my analysis, and specifically, I've adopted the critical realist approach where the data is seen as giving a sense of contextualized realities or located truths about experiences, meanings, or practices. The codes were created at the semantic level. Brown and Clark refer to this approach as semantic or straightforward TA, and I've used Atlas TI for coding. Analysis was carried out with a focus on the experience of the participant, their realities, and their meaning making. The process was inductive or bottom up, data driven, without an attempt to fit the data into any pre existing theoretical frameworks. Episodic narrative interviews, which are semi-structured in nature, were conducted with 14 non-professional rescue volunteers from districts across Kerala. The participants included fishermen, untrained local volunteers, and semi-trained members of religious organizations and regional rapid response teams who had some level of prior experience in the disaster field. In the picture, you can see one of my participants, a 90-year-old boatman who ferried about 400 people single-handedly to safety during the mega flood. What astonished me most was that he had a previous traumatic experience of being caught in a cyclone where he even lost his speech temporarily. But the trauma did not stop him from springing into action when it was called for. Coming to the themes that I have built, the first two themes are about how the participants position himself in the field of the disaster. In the first theme, the participant feels obliged to help by taking into account his physical abilities, skills, and other assets like previous experience in rescue operations. and resources that he may have, which can be of use in the service of the people. His abilities to serve are in contrast to the vulnerability and powerlessness of the people in distress, and there is an obligatory logic or moral reasoning by which he finds himself responsible to take action. I am better off than them. I have the ability to help them. I have a certain moral duty. Therefore, I have to act. The second theme unpacks the hero, who is also essentially a vulnerable human being in the face of lack of predictability and control of the situation and at the mercy of the great forces of nature. The participants have to grapple with a lot of unknowns in the environment. There's a lack of ground information, communication, anxiety about what may unfold, fear of hidden risks, and along with their own feelings of powerlessness, they find themselves responsible to cater to the emotions of the rescuees as well, and often having to lie to them about circumstances so that they can instill confidence in them. Several participants, in retrospect, recall these do or die situations and they are amazed at how they were able to act in the ways that they did back then and refer it to as an almost superhuman will or courage that they were able to muster in the moment. And in looking back, they are still humbled by the experience, insisting that it was not their ability or strength that really made it possible, but the factors beyond them, such as chance, luck, or mercy of God. The next set of themes relate to social aspects that motivate the participants' actions and their meaning making surrounding their relationship with others in the context of the disaster. Both the themes given here draw on the feelings of shared loss and a collective identity as the affected people. The first theme applies in the context where participants feel the collective sentiments very acutely owing to their immediate connection with the locality that has been affected and their sense of belongingness to the place and its people. The second one is a generalization of the same to a wider geography, a range of communities, and even to the larger idea of the state across which people have been affected. Theme 3 captures how the participants' decisions to act are influenced by their emotional ties with the people in distress, being part of the community. Several quotations convey this. If something happens to them, it is no good if we survive. Everybody is a part of us. It's like they see the people as an extension of their self, so much so that they're willing to take extreme risk. The participants would also engage in altercations with state authorities and personnel in the field for their lack of efficiency and shortcomings, often leading the way also and taking charge of the operations out of a sense of responsibility for their people and at times with even a sense of entitlement that these are my people, these are my lands, I know it best, therefore I can serve it best. Theme 4 captures how people from different regions with different affiliations and sociocultural backgrounds within the state unified in the cause of the people against the unfair, powerful forces of nature. The collective feelings of loss appear to have grounded people in the realization that ultimately we are all the same, which is the vulnerable human being. Theme 5 takes this realization of vulnerability further. The disaster appears to have triggered existential thoughts about meaninglessness of life, the human pursuit of worldly goals. If years of struggle and accomplishment can all be wiped away in a matter of seconds, then what is the meaning in taking all that effort? And participants turn to spiritual or religious belief systems in trying to make sense of the meaninglessness in life. In this environment of defeat, the one pursuit that they all seem to derive meaning and sense of worth out of is in the service of another person. On rescuing several people, one of my participants said, that was a moment where there was meaning due to my life. And when you risk your life to save another, it is in a pursuit larger than life. Due to the limited time, I will not be able to discuss the themes in the light of literature, but I would still like to mention the important implications of the study before I wrap up. Apart from inputs towards building community resilience by tapping into the social capital, capacity building of local volunteers, and empowering the existing local initiatives, the findings also hold important considerations for policy and governance, including decentralization of disaster response management, instituting administrative bodies at the grassroots level, and building partnership systems that enable collaboration between the state machinery, community-based organizations, and the citizens who are the first level responders. So to conclude, disasters throw people into chaos, and it brings questions about the meaning of life and existence to the forefront of our thoughts. And when everybody experiences similar feelings of loss and powerlessness, a shared identity cushions the impact. And in saving and serving those in distress, and in being there for each other, and in this human connection, we find meaning. Thank you for listening to me.
Thanks, Adeeba. Well, we've got a minute or two. Does anybody have a question? Okay, well, let's move on, and I believe Lyndsay is next from the University of Liverpool.
Hi, Jeff, and it's almost serendipitous that I'm going after Adeeba. So this is going to be interesting, an interesting follow-on from her findings. Just share my screen. Can you see my screen okay? Perfect. Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Lyndsay Kennedy. I'm going to be presenting the research that I did with Dr. Alina Perez, and that research is around personality's influence on experiencing meaning. I have a question for you. Do you ever wonder why some people seem to have so much meaning in their lives whilst others just don't? Well, I did, and I actually still do. I'm one of those people that's constantly looking for meaning in my life. And I recall a profound experience back in 2015 when I was standing in the ICU and I was looking down at my father, who was lying in bed, wrapped in an ice blanket from shoulder to toe, shivering and shaking in an induced coma. He'd been battling ventricular cardiac arrhythmia, otherwise known as sudden death syndrome, for a number of years before that. And scientifically, he should have died many years ago. And I remember thinking, standing in the ICU, how do you keep surviving? But I knew without a shadow of a doubt that he would survive this. And I knew this because over the years, he had been searching for his purpose, and he'd found it, and his purpose was his children. And through the years of searching and through the years of battling the heart disease and being incredibly industrious, the harder things got, the more he worked, the more he became proactive in knowing that he must be proactive and he will complete and come through each of the operations. And with this, it was almost like a machine was happening, and it built and grew bigger and bigger and bigger. And ultimately, we both believed that the reason why he survived was because of his great connection with his purpose. So this really inspired me to find out more about how different people connect with their purpose and their meaning in their lives. What is this research about? This research is about how people's personality and their personality traits relate to meaning in their life. Now, this is actually quite exciting because personality and meaning has only recently started to be researched. This is because historically, personality was thought of as unchanging. So it's not worth researching something that doesn't change. So the whole point of this research is to find out what can change so that we can get a better outcome. So but more recently, research suggests that personality does change over time. What this means is you can help people grow and connect with their meaning. This is really particularly interesting for developmental psychologists and corporate coaches out there. How do you measure personality? I use the personality trait theory. This theory says that people have a set of measurable traits or characteristics that lead to a set of behaviors. So it's very action orientated. The aspect model was used, and this divides a person's personality across 10 measurable traits. And this is the most widely used lower order trait assessment in the world to date. How do you measure meaning in life? There was a challenge here with picking a meaning measurement tool, because over the last decade, there has been substantial research and development in meaning measurement tools. And what has happened is the tools have developed separately, and therefore there's been a lack of language and classification used across them. What this means is the tools are saying they're measuring the same thing, but they're not. So it was important to pick a measurement tool that was specific enough around what it was meaning, what it was measuring, because meaning is a big word. So I chose tools that split meaning up into 4 categories: purpose, comprehension, mattering, and searching. Purpose being when someone is motivated and directed by a valued goal. Comprehension, I'm comprehending my purpose, connecting those dots. Mattering, I'm feeling significance in the greater scheme of the world. And then searching, I'm actively searching for meaning in my life. This was a survey, and it was run across 269 adults and with 43 nationalities. These were working professionals. The analysis I used was factor analysis, multiple regression, semi-partial correlation regression, and t-tests. So what were the findings? There were a lot, we measured a lot, so I wanted to share 3 of those findings with you today. And those were: industriousness is a constant and strong predictor of meaning. Declaring is not necessarily the same as having meaning. And searching for meaning may be a state, not a trait. So the first finding, industriousness is a constant predictor of meaning. A person who has a personality characteristic of industriousness is more likely to experience meaningful purposeness, comprehending their purpose, and experiencing feelings of mattering. An industrious person is action orientated. They're focused on engaging in tasks, doing things differently, and being proactive. In other words, they just do it. They engage, they get things done. Now, fortunately, industriousness, the behaviors of industriousness are coachable. They are learnable. They can be developed into habits that people can implement in their day-to-day. What does this finding tell us? It tells us that the more industrious you are, the more meaning you will experience. The second finding was that declaring is not necessarily the same as having meaning. Now, interestingly, everybody in the study had meaning in their life. This is actually in line with past research. But what I was interested in finding out was, is there a difference in personality profiles between those that have higher declared meaning versus those who had lower? So I split the group up into higher, mid, lower, and then I compared the personality profiles from the higher and the lower group. And I found significant differences. Those people who had higher declared meaning in their life were more assertive, more intellectually creative, and more compassionate. Assertive people feel empowered to lead. They take action, they speak up, they take charge, and they understand how to influence people because they understand the value of influencing people. Intellectually creative people are educated enough to understand abstract ideas and complex problem solving. They take ownership of their time. And compassionate people have high levels of empathy. They feel others' emotions. They're proactive and they take ownership of their time as well. So what does this finding tell us? It suggests that if you behave more assertively, if you are more creatively, intellectually creative about the way that you think in the world, and if you are more compassionate, you will connect at a higher level with the meaning in your life. Now, you can coach and learn assertiveness and intellectual creativity. But the question that's come from this is, can you really coach true compassion? And the third finding is that searching for meaning may be a state, not a trait. My results here were actually an anomaly. What we found was personality was weakly correlated with meaning and with searching for meaning. But all other research published to date has found strong correlations between personality and searching for meaning. There has been a lot of debate in this area around whether personality is a state that's triggered by the environment, that forces you to start searching for something, versus a trait that's constant when someone's constant and therefore can be measured against the personality traits. So this finding suggests and supports the argument that searching for meaning is a state rather than a trait. So thinking about these results, it really reminds me of Bob Geldo's quote, "A person doesn't just decide what their purpose is, they discover it." Looking back at my father's experience, he experienced all of these factors that this research has identified. He was triggered into the need to search for meaning by his heart condition. He was incredibly industrious in working through planning and just being 100% committed to completing what he was doing. And he became more and more assertive throughout the years about it and deeply intellectualized and thought through and connected what was happening in his life versus with his purpose. If you're interested in connecting with meaning and purpose in your life, don't wait for a trigger. Don't wait for something bad to happen. Start now. Be industrious. Just do it. Get things done. And while you're doing it, practice thinking about how what you're doing is making an impact. And share those thoughts and beliefs with others. By practicing these behaviors, meaning will come. I've uploaded the research paper and also a white paper of this on my website, lyndsaykennedy.com. So feel free to go there if you'd like to download the full research, and you can reach out to me at lyndsay.kennedy@outlook.com. Thank you.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Lyndsay. I'm wondering if we've got here. Oh, okay, we have a question. So we have time for a question here. So Arthur writes, do you think the relationship can be bi-directional, such as having higher meaning and purpose in life can make it easier for someone to be more industrious, assertive, etc.? I am thinking of someone who feels lost or unsure and can have a harder time getting things done.
Yes, brilliant. And that's exactly what this research is helpful for people like that. So yeah, we were looking at correlational relationships. So yes, so it's that chicken and egg, right? What comes first? So the more assertive or the more you can help someone connect the dots, think about what they're doing in their life and getting out there and connecting those dots, talking them through and practicing talking them through, this research suggests then the more meaning you'll have. And we see it the other way around. When you see other people that seem to have a lot of meaning, they are doing all of this. They're being assertive, they're being industrious, they're getting out there and they're getting off the couch and getting out there and just doing things, because we're meaning-making machines. We do naturally create connections. So yes, by using these, it's one or the other. If you're lacking that feelings of connections, you could definitely be using these specific behaviors to feel more connections.
And we've got Benjamin Chabot's written, anecdotally, I know many industrious people who are really successful but lacked meaning in their life. After industriousness, what would be the next element to predict meaning in life?
Oh, good question. So compassion was a big element, but we did find, let me just go to these results, that there may be a trio of predictors to predict meaning in life. And this was looking across purpose, comprehending that purpose, and mattering. And those three, yes, industriousness, but enthusiasm, as well as not withdrawing. So enthusiasm, trying to find the benefits and the good in the things that you're doing. Just, you know, that old saying, fake it till you make it. Old sayings are old sayings because they tend to work and they've been around in our culture for many years. So being enthusiastic and not withdrawing and isolating yourself.
Good. Well, thank you, Lyndsay. And I think we'll move on to our next speaker, Frank Martela of Aalto University.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Hello, everybody. Hopefully you'll hear me, and I'll put on my slides so that you will also see those. So now you should be able to see my slides as well. So I'm going to be talking about the historical emergence of the crisis of meaningfulness and how the religious worldview and the scientific worldview played a role in that. So a few words about my background. So I've been doing research on meaning in life through like various ways. So I've been doing like research on the psychology of meaning, published a few papers on that topic, along with like Mike Steger in few papers. And one key topic that I'd be interested in is the role of benevolence, or role of like pro-social behavior in experiences of meaning. So I've been looking at how, when we are doing good things to other people, whether that affects our sense of meaningfulness. And what I've been finding is that usually that is the case, that when we are able to do good things to other people, that usually has a positive impact on our sense of meaningfulness. Then I'm doing also like some work within the philosophical community around the topic of meaningfulness. And there also like one of the key topics that I've been interested in has been about its contribution. But
excuse me, Frank, I don't think we can see your slides.
Interesting. Okay, let's see. I'll try again. Do you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Good. So there was something there, but now it seems to be working. So and then I wrote this book 1 year. It was published 1 year ago by HarperCollins, A Wonderful Life: Insights for Finding a Meaningful Existence, where I was kind of like trying to synthesize some of my ideas around the topic of meaning and also adding this more historical angle to the topic. And when I was thinking what should be talking in this conference, I thought that I would bring this historical angle here. I thought that might be something interesting for many of you, because that's something that hasn't been like too much discussed when we talk about the topic of meaning in life. What is the historical background? How did we start to ask the question of meaningfulness? And quite often when we talk about the question of meaning, we talk about it as some kind of like eternal question that has been asked since the dawn of mankind. For example, me and Steger in our 2016 paper, we were talking about the eternal question over meaning in life. But at some point I realized that actually, it's not an eternal question. It's something that has like a specific historical origin, at least this phrase, meaning of life. We haven't been using that phrase for a very long time, historically speaking. And I did like some digging into the history and trying to figure out when was the time when we started to use this phrase, meaning of life. And it turned out that this was the guy who used the word or the phrase first time in the English language. And this was Thomas Carlyle, who wrote this book, Resartus, in 1834. And in that book, there was this one sentence where he was like talking about our life is compassed round with necessity, but isn't the meaning of life itself no other than freedom. And this seems to be the first time the phrase meaning of life was used in the English language. And Carlyle himself, when he was using this phrase, meaning of life, he was actually like translating a German phrase, der Sinn des Lebens. And this book, I don't know, it's not too familiar nowadays, but in the 19th century, it was like a very influential book. It has been like even called one of the most influential books of the century, because the book had this power to address one of the key spiritual crises of the time that people were experiencing. So in the book, the like main protagonist goes through this like existential crisis, that they lose their faith in God, they lose their faith in the meaningfulness, and then they go through this period where nothing seems to be mattering, everything is like the same, and they just like go through this valley of darkness. And then in the end, the main character is able to find a new, renewed sense of meaningfulness through this new kind of spirituality that they are finding. And that seemed to be somehow tapping into something that was many people were familiar with in that time. And I said, Carlyle himself was kind of like taking this phrase from the German romantics who used the phrase Sinn des Lebens a few decades earlier. One of them was Friedrich Schlegel, who in his book Lusinde used the phrase. And Søren Kierkegaard, writing in the Danish language, was also using the same phrase around the same time. So it seems to be that there's something happening in the turn of the 19th century around that time, because the first time the Germans used the phrase was 1793, then the English version was 1833 or 34, Danish version 1843, and the Finnish version 1846. So that's when the kind of like the phrase meaning of life has been coined in various languages. And that of course brings the question that why was the phrase invented then, and why did it like spread so fastly around like European languages? So we can like say that something must have been happening in the 19th century to make the question of meaning of life salient to people, making it something that needs its own phrase, so that we can describe something that we are actually experiencing right there in that time. And when we think about what it could be, it's like we can like contrast here with, for example, like the way Aristotle was approaching similar topics. So we go back like few millennia, and in his book Nicomachean Ethics, he was like, one of the key things that he was looking for in the book was like, what is the highest human good? And so what will be like some end of our actions that we wish for an account of itself? That was like one of the key questions of the book. And Aristotle was sure that there should be some kind of end of our actions, because he thought that like everything has its own virtue. So the virtue of the eye is clear sight. The virtue of the horse is about running and carrying the rider. And so because everything has this virtue or has this some kind of like excellence unique to that something, then human beings also must have some like excellence unique to human beings. So we just need to figure out what that specific excellence is about as regards human beings. And he considered several candidates. He was talking about like happiness, he was talking about wealth, he was talking about bravery, but and then in the end, he was like saying that, you know, the human contemplation and virtues are kind of like the where we should be finding that uniquely human thing. But the key thing that he was not considering in the book, that he was never questioning whether humans have a good or an end. He was always taking it as self-evident that, you know, everything in the world has an end to it. So human beings must have an end to it. So we just need to figure out what is specific about human beings to figure out what is the specific human virtue and human end. And what was then happening in the 19th century? Of course, there was like several things happening in the 19th century. There was the Industrial Revolution. There was like quite much urbanization taking place. Traveling was getting more and more popular, so people were able to experience different cultures more than before. But the key thing that I think led to this need to talk about meaning was related to this scientific worldview, which in a way led to this more disenchanted, mechanistic view of the universe. So the universe, before the scientific worldview, kind of like the basic idea of the universe was that it was like somehow created for some purpose, and everything that existed there was created for some purpose. So this was clear to the Aristotle and other ancient Greek thinkers, but it was also clear to the more modern Christian thinkers in the medieval times. So it was always clear that, you know, everything in the world existed for some reason. The cosmos that we were living in was somehow rational, somehow purposeful, somehow made for certain purposes. But then suddenly we have this like challenging worldview, the scientific worldview, which said that, you know, hey, it could be just that everything is just as result of these blind laws of nature, which don't have any purpose to them. Evolution is taking place without any purpose. It's just like some blind mechanisms that led to the emergence of human beings and so forth. So the scientific worldview was kind of like challenging all this thinking where that this more human central and purpose filled way of seeing the world. And instead we had this idea that humans are just these tiny specks in a vast universe, and human life is just brief and arbitrary, and it doesn't exist for any specific purpose. It just happens to be there. So scientific worldview was kind of like leading us to realize that we might not have a dedicated role in the world that would provide us with some kind of like objective meaning or some objective value or some objective purpose for our existence. And this is also like interesting, of course, this is like just historical analysis, but like there's like one piece of empirical research that seems to be supporting this interpretation of the role of lack of religion as leading to this more crisis of meaningfulness. Because Oishi and Diener, they were looking at this question that do you think your life has some purpose or meaning to it? And they found out that the higher the GDP per capita in a country, the more prone people were to answer negatively to this question that their life has a meaning to it. And then that's of course very surprising compared to like most of the studies as regards happiness, which usually show that the higher the GDP per capita, the higher the average levels of happiness of people. So this was like in direct contrast to those research. And when they were then analyzing the reasons for why this could take place, why the GDP per capita is negatively related to meaning in life, they found out that it was religiosity that fully mediated the relationships. So those countries which had higher GDP per capita were the countries which had populations which were less religious, and that it was actually lack of religiosity which explained why there was less people who said that their life has some meaning to it. So before the 19th century, the question about human life that people had been asking was about the end of human beings, the summum bonum, the good of humanity. And that was asked in a context where it was self-evident that something like that would exist. There would be some kind of like end to human beings, some purpose that like explains why humans exist and what they should be striving for in life. And then in the 19th century, where suddenly there came a point when we realized that there might not be any meaning to our life, that our life might not have like any specific purpose to it. That was when the phrase meaning of life was invented. So it was invented in a way to describe something that we might be lacking. So that's kind of like historical, kind of like historical analysis about why have we come to ask the question of meaning of life. And this first requires this like rational cosmos to be like sensible question, and this second question is more this reactionary yearning for objectivity. And what I'm kind of like arguing that, you know, what is the kind of question about meaning that we should be asking today is that we should make this distinction between this more objective question about meaning of life. Is there some like external purpose to human life? But then there's the other question about meaning, which is as important, which is more about this subjective sense of meaning in life. So that's more a question about whether I experience my own life as meaningful. So if this first question, this objective question about meaning of life is more metaphysical or theological question, the second question about subjective meaning in life is more, one could say, psychological question. It's about how we experience our own life. And of course, we can like say many things about that, but I just like, in terms of time, I realized I'm almost out of it. So I just like wanted to say that if this first question, the end of human, that to ask that question, one has to like believe in this like rational cosmos. One has to believe that everything exists for a purpose. And then came the question, meaning of life in the 19th century as a kind of reaction to the potential lack of objective purpose in human life. And what is the question that we should be asking in the 21st century is the question about meaning in life, because that's one good thing about that question is that it's compatible with both the scientific worldview and with the religious worldview. So it doesn't like split us into those who believe in more scientific worldview and those who believe in the more religious worldview, but like everybody of us can like have this experience of meaning, and then we can use, for example, psychological methodology to try to figure out what are the key things that most of us derive this sense of meaningfulness to our own lives. So I think I can end that there. Thank you very much.
That's good, Frank. Well, thanks to you, and thanks to all our presenters. We're out of time, and there's a keynote beginning in less than a minute now. So, at any rate, I'm wondering. I think did we get your address at the beginning there, Frank?
Probably. I can put it in the chat if you want.
Yeah, sure. Just throw it in the chat. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. So happy if you have any questions or comments or anything. Very, very happy to receive those.
Good. Great. Thank you all for coming.
Sing me a sad song over and over. I'll be alright by and by. Let me be consumed in a love divine to find where the treasure lies. I want to hear that small voice whisper to my forgotten soul. They say it's never too late to start again. What breaks your heart